Everyone calls Mushoku Tensei a redemption story. And honestly, I understand why. A man who wasted his first life gets a second chance and then slowly becomes a better person. But I think that misses what makes Rudeus' journey so interesting. Because he isn't trying to erase who he used to be. He's trying to finally experience something he never had before. A life. And that's a way messier journey than a simple redemption arc. To understand Rudeus' journey, we first have to understand what he's running from. What his first life meant. Because before becoming Rudeus Grey Rat, he wasn't just someone who made mistakes. He completely gave up on life altogether. After years of isolation and failure, he stopped trying. He avoided the world itself because trying to live meant that he'd need to deal with rejection or embarrassment or failure. Rather than dealing with all of that, he chooses the path of least resistance and removes himself from everything else. This is why his reincarnation is interesting to me. When he's reborn and lives a whole new life, the story doesn't just treat that as some kind of reset button. Being reborn didn't make him mature or give him a new outlook on life. Despite being in a completely different world with a new face and a new body, and with endless opportunities, he's still the same damaged person he was in his old life. You can see this especially in how Rudeus approaches other people. Despite having the intelligence and confidence of someone who's lived an entire lifetime before, right? He wasn't young by any means. He's still a socially inept guy who spent years hiding. He overthinks conversations and assumes people will reject him outright, and constantly looks at himself through the lens that he's always failed. Being reborn gave him a new environment, but it didn't give him the emotional maturity that he never developed. He still holds his insecurities and selfishness, and even the mindset that led to him wasting his first life in the first place. This is where the show separates itself a lot from other reincarnation stories. Rudeus doesn't just become better because he's in a new world. He grows as a person because that environment challenges him. Time and time again, he's forced to face the weak parts of himself to move forward. His talent in magic doesn't magically make things go his way. His previous world's knowledge doesn't just make him smarter than everyone else. He still faces problems, and this second shot at life just gives him the chance to face them this time, instead of running from them. Reincarnation just gave him one thing, if anything at all. A chance. It didn't promise that things would work in his favor, or that he'd play life on easy mode just because he had magic power. It gave him the chance to change. Rudeus makes it a point to live without regrets this time around. But the hardest part of changing isn't admitting that you're wrong. It's learning how to live differently when the same flaws are still a part of you. And that's why his growth feels more human than a simple redemption arc. He doesn't wake up one day and become someone completely different. He slowly learns how everyone else does, through the same experiences and failures. But experiencing failure is only the beginning. The real challenge is learning how to face it without running away this time. One of the biggest reasons why Rudeus' character development feels so real is because the story never lets him forget who he used to be. He isn't shutting himself off anymore, at least. But he still carries the same flaws that made him who he was. The show doesn't treat growth as just getting rid of all your old flaws and, that's that. It depicts growth as learning to handle the weak parts of yourself better. We see Rudeus constantly trying to face his flaws while feeling pathetic as hell. But that's what it means to grow. He's still selfish at times, and he still struggles socially, and even has some weird, freaky tendencies. The story isn't afraid to show you them. It doesn't for a second try to make you think that Rudeus is a good guy, or that his goal is to become a moral person. He still makes mistakes that hurt him and sometimes the people around him. Well, more often than not, to be honest. But the difference between his previous life and now is that he faces the consequences for his mistakes. He doesn't run away. In his old life, all he did was dodge accountability and avoid mistakes when things got tough. He would just isolate himself. But in his new life, he's forced to confront the consequences of his actions. He's forced to take accountability. Because he has relationships and responsibilities that actually matter now. The best example of this I can think of is his relationship with Eris. After everything they went through on the Demon Continent together for years, and then when she finally leaves him, he's completely destroyed. And the thing is, his reaction isn't just sadness because his girl just left him. It's because Rudeus built his entire identity around the idea that his second life would be different, that people wouldn't abandon him this time. Eris leaving felt like proof that despite all his effort and hard work, he still isn't enough. But this time, he doesn't completely disappear from the world. He struggles and breaks down, but he eventually keeps moving. For someone who spent his entire last life avoiding emotional connections, losing someone he actually cared about hurt this time. For the first time ever, he's forced to confront the emotions that he's never really allowed himself to experience before. It doesn't just serve as an obstacle to overcome, it becomes proof that he finally built something that he was afraid to lose. It's the same with his argument with Paul, because Rudeus isn't just learning how to become kinder, he's trying to learn how to exist in a family again. In his previous life, problems were solved by him just isolating, but now he's got people who actually depend on him, meaning he can't just retreat into his shell whenever something hurts. Their whole dynamic is all complicated, because Rudeus isn't written as some perfect kid who understands everything. Despite having the knowledge of a previous life, he still gets angry and judges Paul for his actions. He has moments where his perspective blinds him, but despite all of that, he actually has to deal with all of it, rather than hiding like last time. He has to actually communicate with people. He has to learn to forgive and ultimately grow as a person. That's why his story feels so genuine. Real people don't completely get rid of their flaws. They learn to live with them, without letting those flaws dictate their lives. Rudeus learns that even after failing, he's responsible for getting back up. But this growth only happens because something changes at the center of his life. He isn't living for himself anymore. The biggest difference between Rudeus' second life and his first isn't his magic or combat power. It's that his world extends beyond just himself. The old version of him was always in his own damn head. He'd constantly be thinking about his own thoughts and past regrets, and even his own fears. His entire world was in his head. Everything revolved around avoiding discomfort or any pain. But his second life forces him to accept that living means allowing yourself to be affected by other people. Through his entire journey, every major relationship teaches him something he never had before. Broider is one of the first people who challenges Rudeus' worldview. He forces him to understand that people aren't just their reputation, or the way others see them. Someone feared by the entire world can still choose to be someone who protects others, without being dictated by others' perception of them. Sylphie shows what it feels like to be accepted without needing to prove himself. She knows all of his flaws but still stands with him. And that matters because so much of Rudeus' first life was built around the belief that if people really saw him, that they'd reject him. Sylphie's one of the first people who proves that you're wrong, that he's still enough. His family teaches him responsibility, and that there's more to protect than just himself. And that's the biggest difference between his previous and current life. His first life was empty because he had nothing anchoring into the world. But his new life has meaning because he finally has something to lose. This is why I think Mushoku Tensei just being a redemption story doesn't cover the full picture. The story is not about morality. It's about experiencing life. Because it isn't just full of good moments. Embarrassment, failure, conflict, grief, and even pain. They all come with the territory of living. The old him is deathly afraid of these things because they hurt. But the new him accepts these things because they're proof that he's actually living this time. This is why the story feels like, I don't know what's the word, but like, it feels raw or like vulnerable. Because the show never promises that choosing to live means that everything is going to work out. One of the main ideas that defines Rudeus' journey is his desire to live without any regrets. But I think there's a deeper meaning to that. Just because he wants to live without any regrets doesn't mean he'll die without any regrets. And that's important because the show never promises Rudeus a perfect second chance. It never promises that everyone he cares about is going to survive. It doesn't promise that mistakes can be undone with willpower alone. And it doesn't promise that trying to be better will mean avoiding suffering. Because that's not what life is. Life is full of failures, loss, and even regrets. We all have moments we wish we could change, but that's just not how it works. The main distinction I see between the old and new Rudeus is the willingness to accept that fact. The old him avoids pain by avoiding life itself, but the new him accepts pain because losing something worth having is better than having nothing at all. His second life isn't meaningful because everything plays out exactly how he wants it to. It feels human and meaningful because he experiences everything that comes with being alive. He loves people, creates memories, he makes mistakes, he grows, sometimes he acts selfishly, but he also loses things. Even if his story isn't perfect, that doesn't mean he failed though. Because the goal was never perfection. The point of Mushoku Tensei is to finally do something about his life. To finally live. People call this a redemption story because they focus on where Rudeus started. But I think the story is more interested in where he goes. Rudeus doesn't become someone who never makes mistakes. He becomes someone who keeps moving forward despite them. And that's something he finally learns in his second life. His story may not end with everyone he loves being alive. It's probably not going to end perfectly, but it will end with something his first life never had. A person who actually lived.